You're listening to Teach Me the Bible podcast. Our mission is to help the people of God understand the Word of God. Join us each Monday and Thursday for new episode releases. Listen to our full library of content at teachmethebible.com or by downloading the Teach Me the Bible app from any app store. You're listening to Teach Me the Bible podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Teach Me the Bible podcast. We are in Genesis and we're picking up today in chapter 10. And so if you've been along with us, then this will make perfect sense to you. We're going to just keep telling the story. But if this is your first time jumping into the podcast, we're going to push you backwards. Start at the beginning because it's a story, and stories start at the beginning and move towards the end. And so, but today, like we said, we're picking up in chapter 10. Noah has died. We've been watching this genealogy play out since chapter 5. And Noah has died, and now we're going to watch his 3 sons. And it's going to start turning into families and nations, and the whole story is going to start changing real fast. And so these are important chapters to focus in on some of the details. So Doc, if you want to help us understand this.
And so we jump right into chapter 10. And of course, as we said, chapters 6 through 9 was a giant expansion on Noah's genealogy, right? And so now we're going to have these genealogies of these 3 sons. Interestingly, they're not taken in order. Mm-hmm. Actually, Japheth is moved to the first. So the Shem, then Ham, and then Japheth. That is the order. But we put Japheth. We kind of go in reverse order. Here we go: Japheth, Ham, Shem, and we end with this genealogy that's going to walk us right into the tower story, but then ultimately, in contrast with that tower story in chapter 11 to chapter 12. And so the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog. There's Magog. We're going to run into that name later in the story. Mm-hmm. One of the few names here that's going to show back up in the story. Mm-hmm. The other would be down in this, so the sons of Gomer or Ashkenaz and Riphath and so forth. And the sons of Javan, this is verse 4, were Elisha and Tarshish. You may remember Tarshish from the Jonah story, yep. Right? Went down to find a ship going to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and so that's about all that you get there. Yeah, and from these coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. And so you're getting the, kind of the separation of the nations,
which is going to be explained more.
Which is going to be explained in chapter 11. How did we get here? Right. Let's go back. Let me tell you that story. Right. So that's going to be chapter 11. So it's kind of a rehash or going back. And then the sons of Ham were Cush and Mitzrayim and Put and Canaan.
Those all show up.
Those all show up, yeah. The 2 in particular that show up in a huge way. Right. Are Mitzrayim, which we don't know as Mitzrayim. We know Mitzrayim as Egypt. And then Canaan, the sons of Cush. We've got some explanation. Cush became the father of Nimrod. And he became a mighty one on the earth, and he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And it was said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, like Babel, as in Babylon. And this is going to show up in a big way in the story. And Eric and Akkad, for the Akkadians, Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. And from that land, he went forth into Assyria, and he built Nineveh and Rabbath-ir. Ir just means a city, Rabbath-ir, and Calah. And risen between Nineveh and Calah, that is the great city. Actually, going to hear this language again when we get to to Nineveh, the city, the great city, right? And so Nineveh, Babylon, Egypt, these are major players in Israel's story. Mitzrayim became the father of a couple of sons, and these sons from which came the Philistines and the Caphtorim. And so So you got the Philistines, you got the Egyptians, you got the Babylonians, you got the Assyrians, all of the enemies. There's going to be enmity between the Israel and these enemies.
They're all coming from Ham.
They're all coming from Ham. And Canaan became the father of Sinai, the firstborn of Heth. So that's the Hethites or Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Archites, and the Sinaites. So all of the ites, right? And the territory of the Canaanite extended from Sidon towards Gerar as far as Gaza. And as you go down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, hold on to those names because you're going to need those too.
And you're going to need to know the boundary of Canaan. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Admah as far as Lasha. So these are the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages, by their land, by their nations, right? And so, that Ham discussion is a huge one that's flowing out of chapter 9, going into chapter 10. These are all the names and players that Israel needed to know when they go take the land. And also Shem became the father of all the children of Eber. This is where we get the Hebrews word, the father of all the Hebrews.
Yep.
The older brother of Japheth, children were born, and the sons of Shem were Elam and Asher and Arpachshad and all these Lud and Aram and it goes down through here, and it says, tracks this line that goes from through Shelah through Aber, verse 24, and the sons of Aber were divided, and this thing's going to track all the way down through this genealogy. And now their settlement extended as far as Mesha, as far as Sephar, the hill country of the east, and the sons of Shem. These are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, by their land, according to their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, by their nations. And so this kind of brings to the culmination the flood story, right? And so we tend to think of the flood as ending in chapter 9, but it really doesn't. It ends in chapter 10 with what happens after the flood with all of the people who get off the boat that populate the nations. And so there are two scenes back to back. There's the flood scene, chapters 6 through 10. We usually say 6 through 9, but it's actually 6 through 10. And then the tower scene. And you remember when we mentioned this back when we were going through chapter 4 and chapter 5 and drawing a contrast, that in Cain's line, he has a son, names him Enoch. He builds a city, try to make his name great. And then the genealogy continues, and it goes down to Lamech on Cain's side. Lamech's multiplying wives and killing people, and all the language that shows up in the flood story right there at the beginning. Everyone is doing what Lamech on Cain's side was doing, multiplying wives, killing people. The wickedness of their heart was great, and intent of their heart was on evil all the day long, and all that. So the flood story is telling you what began with one, now everyone's doing. And so God judged
Violence
it,
is from
right?
the earth.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Did the judgment eradicate all of those who were doing what was right in their eyes, multiplying wives? Nope, they show right back up. They show right back up. The rebellion shows right back up. The enmity shows right back up. Now it's going to be played out at a national level. This scene, chapter 11, we'll just go right through chapter 11. Chapter 11, then, is the what began with one man building a city to make his name great. Now everyone's doing, and this is how we get this separation of the nations. So now the whole earth used one language, or was of one lip, and used the same words. And it came about as they journeyed east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. That journeying east is introduced here. They were expelled from the garden east. Here they're going to journey east. There's going to be a lot of journeying, and the word here nasa is to journey. And that word is going to stand in contrast in these patriarch stories to halak. They're going to walk according to the word of the Lord, or they're going to journey, and their journeys always take them away from the word of the Lord and to the east. There's nothing bad about going east. Just this is how
the storytelling.
Yeah, in the storytelling, right? Yeah. So they went to the land of Shinar. They settled there, and they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they used bricks for stone, and they used the tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches into the heaven, and let us make for ourselves a name, lest we be scattered abroad over the whole face of the earth." In other words, let us not do Genesis 1:26-28, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it, multiply image bearers, and make God's name great through the whole land. Let's gather in one place, build a tower, make our name great, so that we're not scattered, right? And so they claim to build this tower that goes up to God, and the Lord comes down to see a tower, see the city and the tower, which the sons of men had built. This whole sons of men language begins here. The sons of men versus the sons of God language. This is going to be the Gentiles, all the bad guys, and we're going to choose one person out of this group of people to fulfill his promises to. There's a lot that's made at this point about backgrounds, ziggurat or some kind of an ancient news. We don't know. This migdal is actually the word for tower, an ear and a migdal. You're going to see migdal show back up. Migdal, which is tower, comes from gadol, a great tower. It was used of Nineveh, the great city, right? Of Babylon, the great city, and so this is tying back to what was going on back in the line of Shem with Babel and talking about Nimrod, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and this big city, and now so everyone's doing it. They're building a city, make their name great. It's tying back to the to the Enoch story. So the Lord came down to see. Apparently, the tower wasn't tall enough. He comes down to see the tower the sons have built, and he said, "Behold, they are one people. They have the same language, and this is what they began to do. And now their purpose will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down. Let us confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad over the whole face of the earth, and they stopped building the city. And therefore the name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused their language. Confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad the face of the whole earth. And so we really need to pay attention to how the story begins, how the story ends, and maybe we should make that point here, right? So here, the nations, they're all rebelling against the Lord. They're doing what's right in their own eyes. They're trying to make their own name great. At the end of this story, you will have people from every nation, every tribe, every tongue, every lip that are worshiping the Lord. And they're gathered together in one city, worshiping the Lord, gathered together in the New Jerusalem.
But they've filled the earth.
But they have filled the earth, and they're doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord. And so how do we get from this mess to, the builder whose city is architect, and city whose builder is God? And
so there's progress in the story, right? That now he's filled the earth, so to speak. He's spread out these nations. The problem is they're not image bearers.
Yeah, they're going to.
How do we turn these nations into image bearers? Right?
And then gather them back to one city. There's going to be this great irony, and also this language of confusion of tongues, and we're going to get into this whole argument over there when we get into the New Testament. It's going to, but it begins here. The language begins here, and so the Lord separates the peoples, confuses their language, but He's going to choose one man. This is coming in the next story. He's going to choose this one man from the line of Shem, whose name is Abram, and he's going to begin to reveal himself to him, and he's going to make him into a great nation. The Lord's going to make Abram into a great nation. He's going to reveal himself to them. But as this story goes, if Abraham, Isaac, Jacob into Israel, if Israel rebels against the Lord, then he will scatter them, right? Just as he scattered the nations, he will scatter them. Yeah. And then he will actually reveal himself to the nations. He'll bring the nations to himself to make them Israel, and to make them jealous, to move them to anger. And so this is going to be a judgment against Israel in the law. You're going to see it play out in Isaiah. It's going to come to its culmination in the Gospels. It's going to be referred to by Paul in 1 Corinthians. This isn't something new that's happening in the story. It's running from the very beginning of the story all the way to the very end of the story. And so we might as well just, kind of introduce that at this point so that your brain starts to think in those terms. So these are the records of the generation of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and became the father of 𝐼𝐸𝐴D, and 2 years after the flood, and Shem lived. We're picking right back up on that genealogy of chapter 5, right? So we're just pulling this all together. He had other sons and daughters, and this 𝐼𝐸𝐴D guy lives, and he becomes the father of Shelah. He had other sons and daughters, and Shelah became the father of Eber, and he had other sons and daughters, and Eber became the father of Peleg, and had other sons and daughters, Peleg, Reu, and Reu had other sons and daughters, Reu, Surag, and it keeps going down all the way to Nahor, who lived 29 years, verse 24, became the father of Terah. Nahor lived 119 years and became the father of Terah, and had other sons and daughters, and Terah lived 70 years and became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Why do we need to know those three names? Well,
this whole family is going to be built on those three guys.
Yeah, you're going to need to pay attention to these three names in particular, right? Abram and Haran. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran, remember, so we got Abram as the firstborn. And Haran became the father of Lot. That's why we need to know, one of the reasons why we need to know Haran. That's going to come up here later in the story. And Haran died in the presence of his father, Terah, in the land of his birth, Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took wives to themselves, and the name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. Going to need that one. That's going to come back too. The daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, was 𝐸𝐴D. And Sarah was barren. She had no children. And Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, and his son Abram's wife. And they went together from Ur of the Chaldees in order to enter the land of Canaan, and they went as far as Haran and settled there. And so this is gathering up all the characters, where they come from, right? Particularly Abram and Lot with Sarah to get them to the land. Yeah. But don't forget the one that we left behind, because we're going to have to come back to that family.
He shows up in 24.
Yeah, we're going to have to come back to that family to get wives for these descendants, for Isaac, for Jacob. So Laban's going to come from this line. So this just goes to show you that the author is not telling you any irrelevant material. He's not. Moses is not telling Israel any irrelevant material. Now, it may be irrelevant to us. We don't care about the Cush or Mitzrayim or whatever. Well, it wasn't written to us. But it was written to them, and they needed to know these details. And so if we're going to understand what Moses was saying to them, we've got to keep command of these details as well. And so this sets the stage for chapter 12. And so next time we'll pick it right up in chapter 12.
Yeah, one question, and then I'm kind of thinking through this. When we watch these sort of teams developing, right? Yep. It seems like we have the nations who are kind of on the wrong side, right? They've gathered in one place. They've tried to make their name great. Now they're scattered. And then we see this one family in contrast that the Lord is building. So do you think maybe they're going back to that family so as not to intermix with the nations? That's what's happening already right here.
We're going back to the promise and back to the line. Yep, absolutely. Okay. And that's what's going to happen, particularly not to intermarry with the Canaanites.
Right.
Who are in the land. These are the people in the land. We're going back to the family, going back to the promise, going back to the firstborn, the value of the firstborn, all this stuff that's been introduced in these first, 11 chapters and then 12. And it's not just like the 11 chapters and the 12 starts the story. And I know that's how many view this. But as we said before, the plot is on the move.
Yeah.
And so as things change in the scene, details are given.
So you're isolating this family, right? And that's going to play into later. They're going to be a holy nation. They're going to separate themselves with a specific purpose, right?
Yeah. And so there are every detail that comes into the scene is either, moving the plot of the scene or being introduced because you don't need to know this now, but just know that this is where they came from, right? Oh, by the way, we need to mention Nahor here because just keep watching.
It'll show back up.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it later. But it's not relevant in this scene yet, but it is introducing things that are going to show, and that's how narrative literature works, right? And so the author is just going along, Moses is going along and giving Israel all the details they need to know so that the book makes sense, so that his story makes sense, so that their existence and where they're going makes sense.
Yeah. It is really cool to see how these details all have a very specific purpose because we can so easily, especially when we're getting to this part in Genesis, I feel like most people are already starting to get worn out because of the genealogies and skipping over details or whatever.
Because they're saying, I don't care. This doesn't have anything to do with my theology, my belief system. These are just names. I don't want to remember names.
But they're important.
But when they show back up in the story, right, if you haven't paid attention to who these people are and tried to track this thing, some of these names don't show back up in the story.
Right.
Many of them do. And they're there for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do with them when you get there.
Yep.
Where you know how to interpret them and evaluate them.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, like Doc said, we're going to pick up in chapter 12 next time. And so do your best to remember these details because we're going to keep seeing them pop up over and over and over again. But we will see you next week for chapter 12.
For more resources, visit teachmethebible.com or download our app from any app store. You can partner with Teach Me the Bible in helping the people of God understand the Word of God by subscribing and sharing with others. Thank you for listening to Teach Me the Bible podcast.